Portions of the following program are pre-recorded.
Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spieth, sitting in today for Steve Bakken. Coming up in the second hour, Warren Martin will join us with Landman. Talk about the series Landman, Episode 5, as we continue our review on Paramount Plus, our partnership, our content partnership the Crude Life has with Paramount Plus. But in the first hour here, we're going to talk about the JFK assassination. A little bit different today. All right, let's head over to the Zoom line where Mark Adamczyk is on the line with us. He is the author of the JFK assassination chokeholds that inescapably proves it was a conspiracy. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. And this is great timing for me because I was writing a story on the current culture that we live in, where so much of what we find in the media and so much of what we find on TikTok and YouTube and social media is based in fear. And the lead opening paragraph, if you will, and kind of the backdrop of the article I'm working on is JFK's famous speech, "The only thing to fear is fear itself." And so when I saw that this book and this opportunity for an interview came up, I thought, boy, this is fantastic, because I'm a big conspiracy nut. I love puzzles. I like things that keep the mind active, and conspiracies do. And as you're going to probably explain, many conspiracies do turn out to be true. And judging by the title of your book, it certainly seems like there's some evidence to believe that the JFK conspiracy was true. So let's start off by a little bit of a elevator pitch or a summary of your book and your background.
Yeah, no, it is a fascinating and still very current into that. So I wrote the book with 4 other authors, actually, which was kind of fun because we have a lot of different experience, both as researchers, and we have 3 attorneys, including myself, that looked at some of the legal issues in the case, and also most recently the release of the records problem. So it's not a conspiracy theory book, because there's 1,000 of those. This is, we want the readers to leave with the conclusion that there was a conspiracy in the case, that being Lee Harvey Oswald did not kill President Kennedy by himself, as the Warren Commission 61 years ago concluded or put out there for everyone to absorb or accept. And so it's based on historical record and fact. So you can call it a conspiracy fact, if you will. We took the last 60 years of records that are now available, testimony from people that worked on the case or investigated the case, and created a book that goes into different segments of the actual case, what happened or didn't happen in Dallas and before and after the assassination. And so our goal was to have a reader who maybe knew nothing about the case, or someone like yourself who probably knows a lot more, to leave without a question, knowing that there's a lot more to the story, and that the Warren report that has been so brilliantly sold to through the media and in history books for 60 years now is just a fiction.
It's interesting how many conspiracies are actually true, whether it be on a local state government or a county board where 4 or 5 different people are acting together. Conspiracies are very real. Did you uncover anything to do with the conspiracy that the CIA was the one that started the conspiracy movement to debunk a lot of different conspiracies? Did that question make sense?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, so the we can definitely get into that, and I have some thoughts on it. Each of the 10 chapters in the book focuses on one segment of the case that we agreed as a group of authors was a chokehold. In other words, there is more than a 95% probability that what the official story is just, like I said, fiction. So it's anything from the fact that the alleged assassin Oswald could not have been on the 6th floor of the building at the time the shots were fired, We go into the single or magic bullet explanation to explain that was the foundation of the Warren Commission's conclusion that there were 3 shots fired by one person only. We go into that in depth. So there's you can read each of the chapters on its own and come away very compelled that there is a conspiracy in the case. When it comes to the CIA, why that's not a chapter in chokeholds is because there's a lot of speculation on that. We know a lot in the historical record about information the CIA had on Oswald and didn't disclose to either the Warren Commission or the House Select Committee on Assassinations that reinvestigated the case in the late 70s. So I believe, to sort of answer your question, a big reason why there's still 4,600 records withheld has to do with the CIA not telling the entire story about Lee Harvey Oswald.
Why do you think the CIA has yet to disclose 4,600? Is it that many, 4,600 documents that have yet to be disclosed?
Yeah, it is. Well, there was, we can go through the history of that, but our latest count is over 4,600 that are either withheld in full or heavily redacted. And a lot of them are CIA records. We don't know exactly how many of them are. There could be FBI records and other agencies, but I'm left, and this is my position, and others agree with it, that it goes back to New Orleans, where Oswald was very public as a quote unquote pro-Castro communist in the summer of '63. That was all a CIA operation. And then I believe it unfolded in Dallas a few months later.
Wasn't there a law passed that all these documents were supposed to be undisclosed and fully unredacted?
Yeah, yes. So I've become an expert in that statute in recent years. That, I know a lot about the case, the things that we can go into. But I figured as a lawyer, I'm like, why don't I read the statute? Because in 2017, you may recall Trump at the time, when president was announcing he was going to release all the rest of the files, because that's what that law, the 1992 JFK Records Collection Act, passed by Congress unanimously, said, okay, that was passed in 92. They said, okay, 25 years from now, there can be no reason for any records to be withheld unless the president certifies that there's still an identifiable harm in such a record and explains why.
Mark Adamczyk, I'm going to ask you to hold that thought for just a moment or two. We're going to take a brief pause. Excuse me, I get excited here. We're going to take a brief pause. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation. The JFK conspiracy coming up next hour. Landman, the series. My name is Jason Space, and you're listening to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
Super Talk 1270. Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spiess, sitting in for Steve Bakken. Mark Adamczyk is our guest. He is an author. He's written a book about the JFK assassination, and we're going to get right back to the interview. Before we went to break, you were going to talk about Trump, President Trump.
Trump did an about face at the 11th hour. He just issued a 3-year delay. We know he had last-minute meetings with intelligence agencies that led to him changing his position, and Biden has done the same thing. And now it's 2024, and there's still all those records with no explanation from the president, or Congress has the oversight authority under that law to make sure that all the records are declassified. They haven't done anything either. There is one congressman out of Memphis, Tennessee, that is initiating a new bill to fix the problem. And I really hope it's successful, because it's not a hard problem to fix. It just depends on whether the agencies will also follow the law or continue to hold so tightly to these last files.
The word transparency is a word that keeps coming up more and more in today's world. And to me, it really seems that until these files and documents are unredacted and brought to light, that nobody's going to believe the lone gunman. And it's very hard to believe that one person could pull off something like this, because on one hand, a lone gunman assassinating a president is remarkable. That's an absolutely remarkable trait for someone to do. I mean, in Ocean's 11, it took 11 people to rob a casino. And on the other hand, it says that if one person was able to, well, then it speaks volumes of the Secret Service and the protection of a president. So they're kind of damned if they do and they damned if they don't, huh?
Well, yeah, and we don't even need the rest of the files to know that the official story, as I said, fiction. If you read Chokeholds or even a few chapters in it, you'll come to that conclusion pretty quickly that just is not credible. It wasn't investigated properly, and not to mention the shooting itself, but the ongoing cover-up that started the weekend of the assassination in '63 and continues to this day. There's a whole chapter in the book about 60 years of obstruction of justice just in this case alone.
What do you think the most shocking chapter is in your book as far as questioning or uncovering that somebody might, if they pick it up and read it, what do you think they're going to be blown away by the most?
Wow, that's well, some of them are more sexy than others, right? To some readers, if they wanted to, I mentioned the fact that Oswald couldn't have been in the sixth floor where the Warren Commission said the shots were fired from. There's a chapter on Jack Ruby, the assassin of Oswald that weekend. Prior Plots, I think, is fascinating. Paul Blow wrote that chapter about the various plots that were either foiled or uncovered prior to Dallas that had a very similar fingerprint of the event in Dallas. I think chapter 1 is awesome because it goes through the official record, insiders, investigators, other investigations, and what they've said over the years about how much of a problem the Warren report is, and how it just should be thrown out the window. So they're all good and very different.
Do you go through multiple scenarios, hypothesis, speculations, if you will? I mean, there's been a number of pontifications by people, whether it be, Cuba or the organized crime, or one of my favorite ones that I kind of believe mostly is when you take a look at all the assassinations in the history of the United States with presidents, the one common element seems to be they wanted to make a change with the banker laws and the banking system. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if you get into the banking system with this, but like I said, there's the Cuba and the organized crime as far as other examples. You get into the different scenarios and pontifications that people have had in the past?
We touch on Cuba and the anti-Castro CIA activities at the time, which are clearly now a focus and should be a focus as a likely explanation for what happened. We don't get into speculation in this book because so many books have been written on, the autopsy or, what angles could the gunfire. That stuff is never going to be fully solved, and it's fascinating. What we did is we took 60 years of the actual record, like what we know that can't be disputed, and we put it together in a way that if you finish the book, and it's a pretty easy read, you'll be left knowing without a doubt that there was a conspiracy, how many people it involved, and from what organizations. These things are compartmentalized. So you have a patsy, in this case Oswald, who is definitely had intelligence connections, a lot of them. That's heavily covered in the book. You had Kennedy's enemies, not only the agencies, the military, the hardline war machine, right? And Kennedy had a lot of other things. His foreign policy, he was making accommodations with the Soviet Union on nuclear weapons. He had back channel communications going on with Castro, while at the same time, the CIA mafia apparatus was trying to assassinate Castro. So a lot of things, I think, converged, and they had a perfectly teed up story for it on that day.
Do you get into political individuals, members of the CIA that maybe were still in power, or people that were a part of that particular organization or party that went on to continue their power in government?
Yeah, only if it's the record at this point, right? So, yes, there are CIA officers and agents named in the book for what we know the activities they were in, what groups that they ran. Absolutely. There's nothing we believe in the book that is pure speculation or even guessing. So yeah, we don't really cover the Secret Service too much. I mean, they destroyed all their Kennedy records not that long after the assassination, but we know of the failures there. There's been some awesome books written on that. So yeah, anything that we know that's record testimony or in a record that has been released since the statute was passed in '92. That's there for it's fair game to talk about.
And we will talk about that when we come back here on Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spiess. Mark Adamczyk is our guest. He has a book he's written on JFK's conspiracy and the assassination. You're listening to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
Conservative talk without apology. The Regular Joe Show with Joe Gigante. Weekday evenings at 9 on Super Talk 1270 and the free Super Talk 1270 mobile app. Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spiess, sitting in for Steve Bakken here today. Mark Adamczyk is our guest. He's an author. He's an attorney. He's written a book on the JFK assassination. Quite fascinating. And I want to get back to the interview.
Did you see any connections or correlations with how the JFK assassination was handled through your research? And I'm not sure if you investigated the Ronald Reagan assassination attempt or President Trump's recent assassination attempt. Is there any, just to kind of make it, I guess, modern, if you will, because my guess is you were working on this long before President Trump's assassination attempt, but it does kind of people's mind goes there, go there, whether it be the Reagan assassination attempt or the recent President Trump assassination. Do you think there's any sort of connection or comparisons?
Well, yes. I mean, because if you look at the pattern, the fingerprint of all of them is a lone deranged gunman with no Confederates, wanted to make a name for himself for whatever reason, political ideology, whatever. I think one of the stronger connections is the assassination in '68 of Bobby Kennedy, JFK's younger brother. Very, similar story. A lone gunman shot him in the pantry of the hotel as he's leaving a political speech running for president. There's a lot of problems in that case too. And his son, Robert Jr., who, as you know, has run for president and now endorses Trump. He's taken a great interest in the assassinations of his uncle and his dad. And so there's definitely connections all throughout. The JFK case is the most, talked about because of the mystery and the fact that it wasn't solved, and any serious investigation that went into it was stymied by the agencies that hold the records, that hold the answers, and they just don't want a full explanation. It's just as simple as that. And what can be done about it? Release the rest of the records, and the president needs to go up against these agencies and say, no, this is not the law. If there is a record that we need to protect that definitely harms the national security of the United States today, then that's a discussion, an internal discussion for them, for sure. But it defies logic at this point, like you said.
It's difficult for me as a trained journalist to see how, and I'll use the JFK example as a conspiracy as an example, and whether it be the 9/11 conspiracy or the Bobby Kennedy Jr. RFK or some of the other conspiracies, very similar, because there are a lot of people out there that are impacted by it and they want to know the truth. And there are a lot of people out there who pay a lot of money, whether it be through taxes or through different means, to get the truth and to see how easily it can be turned into a comedy or turned into something that's dismissed. And with the JFK one, I think of that famous Seinfeld magic loogie scene where, I mean, most people, if you try to have a serious conversation about something that's extremely serious, they go right to the comedy. They go right to the dismissal part. How hard is this for you to get people connected with this in a serious way? Are you finding that there's an audience out there that really wants to know this type of information on a factual basis? Or are you finding out that, you know, maybe you got to work a little bit harder than you thought because of how pop culture and other avenues have really kind of, I don't know, kind of usurped fact, I guess. I don't even know other way to put it.
Yeah, it is a challenge. You know, the more popular movies, you know, podcasts, articles, whatever you call it, from the past 60 years that go on the mainstream publications are generally, well, across the board for the most part, the lone gunman, you know, Oswald did it. Nothing to see here. That's what they told us. They investigated it. Like, the case is old. Like, why do you care anymore? Right. But the connection with the current, our colleagues and friends currently is it matters because of the transparency issue. And if they're still trying to sell this old story that we now know is complete fiction and will not even entertain an alternate discussion publicly about it, then what other explanations are for other major catastrophic events in recent history, right? So this one, of course, is the biggest one. It's most popular, but you can go into anything and say, you know, have we been? I guess what I've learned both recently with the Trump assassination attempts and all the others we kind of touched on is not to believe anything that's released immediately in the mainstream media, because if it's released that quickly, then it had to have been planned that way without a real investigation, right?
The name of the book, JFK Chokeholds, or JFK Assassination Chokeholds. The word chokeholds, you know, when I think of like a business or organizational, you know, you've got choke points, you know, something funnels down and then it stops. It gets choked out. Is that kind of what you're talking about? That you can fall to a certain point and then it just gets choked out. You can't go any further.
Yeah, that's a great explanation of it. We when we talked about the concept for the book, our goal with each of the 10 subjects we go into and as a whole was to leave it to be an undeniable conclusion. And that's why we use a lot of the legal standards of proof in the book. And that's what's kind of unique. What's unique about it is we looked at the criminal law standard for convicting a person in our justice system as beyond a reasonable doubt, right? The courts have interpreted that as at least a 95 or greater probability that is the truth. So we didn't write about anything that we didn't believe met that standard.
Mr. Mark Adamczyk, I'm going to ask you to hold that thought for just a moment or two, folks. He's an attorney. He's an author. He's written a book on the JFK assassination. I'm sitting in for Steve Bach, and my name is Jason Spiess. Thank you, folks, for joining us. Warren Martin is coming up in the next hour to talk about Landman, the series on Paramount Plus. At thecrudelife.com, there are discount links to Paramount Plus if you'd like to go subscribe and stream and catch up with Landman. Episode 5 we're going to be covering next hour. My name is Jason Spiess, and you're listening to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
Super Talk 1270.
Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
All right, welcome back to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spiess. I'm sitting in for Steve Bach, and one more segment left with Mark Adamczyk, the author of a book on the JFK assassination. He's also an attorney. He's done a lot of research into this. Fascinating stuff, fascinating interview as well. Coming up in next hour, Warren Martin with Kansas Strong. He's doing kind of a radio tour. He's reviewing Landman, the series on Paramount Plus. But let's get back to our interview with Mark Adamczyk.
One of the questions I've always had, and I don't know if you got into this in your book or not, but Jack Ruby, that was the name of the guy that ended up killing Lee Harvey Oswald, correct?
Yes.
Whatever happened with that? I mean, I rarely hear anything about it. It almost seems like he was assisted or got help through the whole deal. Like he wasn't really held accountable. Maybe he was. I don't know. I never hear anything about him. What did you get into Jack Ruby at all?
Yeah, there's a whole chapter on it in Chokeholds, and it's a great chapter. It would answer all the questions you just touched on. That event, the president had just been killed. They had Oswald in custody. All the information about him being a so-called communist was already out there. He wasn't admitting to anything. He said he was a patsy, and he had conviction in saying that. So I think part of the plot, again, we'll never know for sure, is that Oswald probably wasn't supposed to survive November 22nd after he allegedly shot the president, so that he wouldn't talk, right, because of his intelligence activities. And he was put in position there very precisely to be the immediate patsy, right? So when he survived that day and he was in police custody and started asking for legal representation, saying these things, the panic button was hit. So Jack Ruby was a local mafia type, had connections to the anti-Castro Cuban activities you mentioned. And he got the call to eliminate Oswald. He was stalking Oswald all weekend, from the evening of his first press conference over at Dallas Police Headquarters. And then eventually he got into the basement where Oswald was being transferred from the city to the county jail. It was televised, and he somehow got in there with a revolver and got access to Oswald and shot him, and the whole world saw it. So what happened after that, of course, he was arrested and charged with murder. He initially, his lawyers advised him to say he did that in an act of passion because he felt so bad for the Kennedy family. He didn't want Jackie Kennedy to have to come back to Dallas to testify in Oswald's murder trial. Didn't want her to have to go through that, right? That was his story. But even Ruby himself, not long after, started talking. He's like, look, I got to go to Washington to talk about this. I can't talk about this here. He told this to the Warren Commission investigators. There's more to it. People in high places put me in this position. I can't talk about it here. And then a few years later, he died in prison from cancer.
Yeah, I never even knew that. I guess when they spend our history books and school teachers spend so much time making sure we know that Lee Harvey Oswald was a lone gunman and that the Warren Commission has the official report. That's almost like a conspiracy. The fact that they got all the teachers to parrot the same thing, isn't it?
Well, remember the intelligence agencies largely control the mainstream media and textbook publishers. I was having a conversation with a teacher the other day. My kids are in high school now, and I told her about the book, and I was like, I probably wouldn't be allowed to teach this if I was a guest lecturer in your history class one day. She's like, no, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Have you shown it to any teachers, any history professors, anything? I mean, you mentioned that they're primarily attorneys that worked on this. So knowing some of the legal pitfalls and some of the wording and some of the ways around that. But how about some historians or some history professors or anything like that? Has anybody commented or have you shared that with anybody?
Yeah, we've had a number of good reviews written on the book. And the thing that's cool about it is whether you still believe in the lone nut story or you believe in a conspiracy, our book is been widely applauded through historians and researchers that have maybe looked at one angle of the case very seriously, or they believe there was probably a conspiracy, but just haven't read enough on it. So yeah, that's what gives it credibility. The book is that it is historical record put together in a smart, concise way based on a standard of proof.
So this next question is more of an opinion based question based on your experiences dealing with this topic. And as I mentioned, I've done a lot of these different interviews with conspiracies, whether it be the Ronald Reagan assassination attempt and 9/11 to the moon landing even. And what I've found, there are two different, I guess, rejections of conspiracies. One, people are afraid. They're literally afraid to believe it. And the second one is almost like an apathy where they don't want to, or they're too lazy to, or it's I say lazy or apathy because it's like they just don't have any energy, but they're not afraid to. But there's certainly a group out there where you can see they're afraid for whatever reason. I don't know if they're afraid of authority, they're afraid to believe it, but there is a fear definitely of believing a conspiracy. And then there's almost like an apathy. What has your experience been on those that are kind of standoffish or maybe rejected outright?
Yeah. It's all over the map. I mean, you can talk about the fear. I think it's warranted because dozens of witnesses and those with knowledge of the case suffered mysterious deaths in the years after the assassination, leading up to the reinvestigation by Congress in the late 70s. So we don't cover that really in chokeholds because there's not enough proof as to why each person died, but the statistical probability of that is so ridiculous that you got to think about it, right? The apathy, yeah, it gets back to, well, it's such an old case, why do we care? We've touched on why it still matters, and you read something and then you go back to your day job and you have family and other commitments, and I have that too. So I decided that something I could do to help would be to focus on the recent, records issue, study that, write articles on it, get that into chokeholds along with the other authors that go into all aspects of the case, and awareness on a global picture that what we've been told for so long is just wrong.
Mark Adanzip, thank you very much. My name is Jason Spiess, and this is Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. Landman next.
Talk of the Town, weekday morning starting at 9 on Super Talk 1270 and the free Super Talk 1270 mobile app. The best weekend talk lineup is on Super Talk 1270. Check out the program schedule at supertalk1270.com and on the free Super Talk 1270 app.
Portions of the following program are pre-recorded.
Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
And greetings and salutations, folks. My name is Jason Spiess, sitting in today here for Steve Bakken here on Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. Coming up in our next segment, we're going to be talking with Warren Martin from Kansas Strong about the Landman series on Paramount Plus. Paramount Plus and the Crude Life have a content partnership, and discounted links, by the way, for Paramount Plus available at thecrudelife.com. All right, let's get to our Landman review, where we fold in realities and some myth busting, if you will. All right, let's head over to our Zoom line here, where we've got Warren Martin with us. Kansas Strong, Oil Man reviews, Landman reacts. I guess I looked the other day, and I have been interchanging review and react. But Warren, how you doing today?
I think I'm reviewing and reacting. I think both of them are appropriate.
I think so, too. And we were just chatting briefly before we started this podcast here that we both kind of hit the wall here Sunday night. And great football games on this afternoon, and got a chance to watch Landman. In fact, I watched it 1.5 times today.
Okay.
I watched it this morning. Well, I was taking the dog out, and I didn't have my notepad with, so I just kind of absorbed it in. And then I went back and I kind of wrote down some notes and that kind of thing in preparation for this here deal. And I got to tell you, Warren, just right off the bat, I thought this was the best episode yet. I thought out of all 5 episodes, I thought this was the most enjoyable. I thought it was the most relatable. I thought there was some fascinating moments to discuss today. Just what was your instant reaction to episode 5?
We talked.
Where is Home is the name of it. Yep.
Yeah, we talked about episode 4 and how episode 4 was kind of a slower episode, but it really tied everything together, kind of laid down the plot line for where we're going in the future. And this episode kind of really tied up those knots and showed where we're headed. And so I think it was a good launch into the last half of the season.
Episode starts out, they're in the oil field. They're at an oil well. And, kind of what was interesting to me was there was kind of setting the stage a little bit that some of these oil rigs need to be worked over. They need to be remodeled, if you will, upgraded. They're old. And then I liked it. In the beginning part before the series of who's the credit, the opening credits, they call that a teaser. Cheers was really popular for that. In fact, there were not too many teasers before Cheers. Cheers came about and they did their little 30-second joke, minute joke, and then they went into the opening credits, which had the iconic theme song, Everybody Knows Your Name. And this episode here, what I took from the teaser, Warren, was the oil field logic. Was you had Billy Bob trying to get money from a billionaire, which was akin to donating, asking the guy for a kidney. You've got the 3 guys giving each other advice on women. Oh, you're moving in with your ex-wife again. Boy, that's some sound logic there, buddy. How to manage. Well, literally within a 2-minute time frame, there was 4 or 5 fantastic oil field logic moments. And, it was advice. It was one-upsmanship of competition within there. It was a little bit of, hey, dummy, you've been down this road before type of a thing. I just thought it was a great little synopsis of oil field logic. And quite honestly, if anybody's not familiar with truckers, oil field workers, maybe some heavy construction people, that to me was what I used to call trucker logic. I call oil field logic, kind of that industrial logic, if you will. What was your takeaway from the trying to get money from a billionaire and some of the advice they were giving back and forth to each other?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people don't understand that the oil industry is really built on margins, and margins dictate everything. And so every oil company, depending on the size that it has, if you're a major producer, you're an Exxon, you're a Conoco, you're one of those that have been referenced in the movie. Your margins are very different than an independent oil and gas producer. And where Norris is coming in, he's coming in as a landman for an independent company that is, by this episode's own admission, has joint wells with Conoco, and also has, so they're kind of playing on both the independent side and the big oil side. And that's really important because margins are everything in the oil and gas industry, and your majors have very different margins that they'll consider acceptable as compared to, say, an independent oil gas producer here in Kansas. Here in Kansas, there are no major oil companies that are doing production here in Kansas. And the reason is because here in Kansas, the average well in Kansas produces about 2.5 barrels a day. They're very low margin wells, and the majors have pulled out a long time before where we're at right now. And that's why you have we have almost 2,000 independent producers that are here in Kansas that are producing oil. And so margins are a huge thing, and every company has their parameters of what they see as acceptable margins or unacceptable margins. And when you go out into the oil field, when you start looking at wells, over time, those wells build up paraffin. They, they build up deposits, and you sometimes have to acidize them. Sometimes you have to go out and strip them back out and clean the wells so that you can get them back up to production levels that you're acceptable with. And that costs money. And it's always a balancing act between how much money do we put into the well and how much money are we going to get out of the well. And I thought it was a great scene that kind of really emphasized that aspect of the oil and gas industry, which is something that a producer considers every single day. How much do we put into the well, and how much are we going to get out of that well? And is it worth it? Is it not worth it? And so where a lot of wells, majors would say, hey, cap that, plug that well and close it out. Smaller independents would say, no, I'll take that well. And so what happens is you have a lot of transfer of leases, you have a lot of transfer of wells between different size companies who are willing to accept different margin levels. And I thought it was a good scene that kind of emphasized that point.
Mr. Warren Martin, I'm going to ask you to hold that thought for a moment or two. Folks, we're reviewing Landman, a series on Paramount Plus, streaming exclusively on Paramount Plus. The Crude Life has a content partnership with them. We have discount links available at thecrudelife.com if you'd like to go ahead and watch the series if you do not have Paramount Plus. My name is Jason Spees. Warren Martin is our guest. I'm sitting in for Steve Bakken, and you're listening to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
Super Talk 1270.
Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spees, sitting in here for Steve Bakken. We're reviewing Landman, the series on Paramount Plus, streaming exclusively. Had a little coffee burp there. We have discount links available at thecrudelife.com if you'd like to have a discount on Landman, stream it exclusively on Paramount Plus. Look at me getting my notes all messed up here. Let's go back to Warren Martin and get to the review, if you wouldn't mind, folks. Next up, the lawyer has a scene with, actually, the two lawyers have a scene. She shows up to their communal living, drops a note about how it's inappropriate to have a meeting at a residence. Keep the kind of the modern day wokeness or the modern day he, she name. I don't even know what the PC word is. It used to be called political correctness back when, I was in college and in my, I guess, formative media years, but it's changed so many times. So if someone's offended by this, I guess I apologize, but that I think that's interesting how they're keeping that storyline going with the attorney, how she's offended by everything. And I actually wrote down, now remember, I'm an old wrestling fan. Like, I like WWE wrestling. I even like the WCW wrestling with Ted Turner back when he owned it. And so I wrote down the lawyer equals heel turn, which means she's kind of turning into the bad guy or the bad person, if you will. And the reason is my understanding is she's from the corporate world, right? She's the corporate attorney. And then the comic relief of the series is the independent attorney who's constantly bringing a comedic role into this whole series about just how out of place he is in this whole environment. And he's fantastic. He's turning into probably going to win an award for being a supporting actor when this is all said and done, just because of how good he is. But here this corporate attorney, last episode, she was kind of the hero. Now she's coming in and she's almost like a villain because, man, you start going after somebody's 401k, trying to manipulate the system, trying to purposely lie and fudge and manipulate. That's not going to be responded well. That's not going to be received well by the audience. So that when she went there, I don't know, Warren, if you can come back from that. Like, she's now kind of the evil person going forward now as this corporate attorney trying to, you take away somebody's livelihood, that's akin to killing the person. So you take away somebody's 401k, which they're foreshadowing with Cooper and this widow. So now you've got Cooper and this widow foreshadowing the 401k issue. You have this attorney who's part of the corporate structure, forcing this independent attorney to do something that he's not comfortable doing. This is a kind of a very interesting storyline, Warren. I've never heard of an oil company ever doing this. I've never in my life heard of an oil company trying to play shell game, sleight of hand with anybody's 401k during a disaster situation. Is this anything that you've ever heard of? Is this, talk to me a little bit about this storyline. This one was I was a little perturbed by this storyline. Let's just call it that.
Yeah, I think that, it definitely went against the grain of what they are as an independent oil and gas company. Certainly, I think that anytime you get into major corporations, the lawyers that serve them, their main goal is a return on investment, ROI. And so they want to figure out how to get a company out of a position, out of a situation with the lowest payout that you can possibly give. And that's what she really comes into that mentality with. But I think the episode, what it talks about, we're talking about your home. Yeah, this whole episode revolves around the idea of home. And so you see one aspect of that when Cooper goes to her house and he immediately starts mowing her lawn, taking care of everything in her house, going through her budget, going through her bills. And that's really the sense of what you find in the oil and gas industry is when you are out in the field working in a situation that is high risk, that is definitely on the, like agriculture and a lot of different industries, manufacturing, in some situations, you're working in an industry where there is the possibility of significant damage being done or even death taking place. When you go through those situations with people, and in this case, Cooper was blown up at a well site with the rest of his crew, and that melds people together into a family. And so you get a real stark contrast between him going to help her out and what was supposed to be her husband's best friend or one of his good friends that blows up but doesn't help her out. It really establishes the idea that home in the oil field is those who have a shared experience that take care of each other. And I think that's a big component that's lost between independent oil and gas producers and more corporate oil and gas producers. I don't know of any instance where oil and gas companies have tried to take away people's 401ks or include that as part of their payout for loss of life or any other injury that's taken place. But I think it does show that there is a huge difference between a corporate mindset where the only thing that matters in a corporate mindset is the bottom line, and more of an independent mindset where an independent mindset, home really matters. And taking care of the people who are working with you and doing right by the people who are working with you, that's a big deal and it matters. And I think it's really setting up that juxtaposition between the corporate world versus the independent world and how the value of this idea of home is really considered.
All right, once again, Warren Martin, going to ask you to hold that thought. We're going to take a brief pause. When we come back, we're going to continue the reaction and review of Landman, the series on Paramount Plus, streaming exclusively. Folks, if you'd like to get a discount, we do have discounted links available at thecrudelife.com. Also, our Substack page, links available at thecrudelife.com as well. And check it out. Landman, it's a fantastic, entertaining show. A little bit of Hollywood, a little bit of reality. Warren Martin is our guest. We'll be back in a moment, folks. My name is Jason Spees, and you're listening to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spees, sitting in for Steve Bach, and thank you, folks, for joining us. Coming up next, we continue the conversation with Warren Martin, Kansas Strong, as we talk about the Oil Man reacts to the Landman series on Paramount Plus. And if you'd like a discounted link to Paramount Plus, thecrudelife.com has discount links available there, folks, if you'd like to check it out and save a few bucks. But we're going to get right back to the interview with Warren Martin. I tell you, the idea of the corporate world being portrayed in this was nothing short of
ruthless boardroom business and a rapid rush to gaslight. I mean, trying to get things done before they can get an attorney. That's the problem, I think, is that because this is being done in such an unethical way, in a manipulative way, that's where people have a problem with the bottom line or corporations trying to save money. Independents want to save money. Independents worry about the bottom line. Family businesses are trying to make, but they're not willing to take the 30 pieces of silver, if you will. They're not willing to, turn their back on ethics and try to gaslight or manipulate a situation. So that was what I took away from that, was that this lawyer's heel turn, if you will, man, that came out of nowhere. Trying to incorporate some of these 401ks into the settlement, like that to me was trying to paint oil companies into a negative light where that's really hard to come back from, Warren. That's a really hard place to come back from. You start messing with people's retirements and 401ks, and it doesn't matter what age you are. If you're 90 years old or if you're 25, I mean, retirement is sacred. I mean, that's where you're supposed to be enjoying life, not having some oil company taking it away from you just because it save a few bucks for some CEOs type of a thing. So,
well, if I can interject right
please
there.
Please do.
Yeah, and I think that you're right. There's one of two ways that we're going to go from this. One is they're setting her up to be the fall guy. They're setting her up to be the evil person that's in the mix. The other way is if you look back at the past episodes where she's come on the scene, she's acknowledged that she doesn't know what's going on, that she has a very specific niche that she legislates or litigates, and she doesn't really know much beyond that. We've had episodes where Norris, Billy Bob Thornton's character, educates her on the oil and gas industry and what actually happens and how important it is to your life. And so there's one of two directions we go here. One is she does become the bad guy that's in the company that the company has to fight against to maintain its idea of home. Or the other way that we go is that she comes in and she's where she's at, and she's playing both sides, and then she has an epiphany of how important the oil and gas industry is down the road and switches sides or comes on board to one side rather than the other. And I'm kind of eager to see which way that they go with that in this show, because I think it could go either way.
I am too, because they keep portraying her wokeness, her that ilk, if you will, the green and the climate change and the Greta Thunberg acolytes and et cetera, et cetera. And now we're at the lobbyist shareholder dinner. And there's a few things I thought was pretty interesting was, first of all, it did seem like a regular oil and gas event where you've got the one side of politics and then you've got the other side of politics. They're very polarized. I was a little bit not taken back or surprised or anything along those lines, but I did write in my notes the exports part. I thought that was an interesting educational part. I do think this series overall is doing a fantastic job educating the masses on some bullet points of the oil and gas industry. And part of what we kind of found was that China is going to be getting a huge is going to be a recipient probably of American oil here in the coming future. Russia, there's some possibilities there as well, as they kind of drop the seeds that these are companies that are emerging and wanting to use more energy. And so a couple things I wrote down from the lobbyist shareholder dinner. Exports was my first kind of takeaway. I've got a couple more down. Warren, what did you make about the exports comment that was kind of thrown in there? And your overall takeaway from that shareholder dinner where there was a little bit of conflict, if you will.
Yeah, I think that the exports comment's a big comment, especially for the oil and gas industry here in Kansas or here in the United States. It's important because here in the United States, we are right on the verge of being energy independent, meaning that we produce more energy than we actually use. And the reality is even if we became energy independent, we would still be importing energy and we would still be exporting energy. But the idea behind the export comment was the fact that we're basically utilizing all of the energy we produce in the United States right now. If we produce more energy, we have to export that in order for it to be viable to the rest of the world. Otherwise, the energy cost here in the United States begins to dwindle or begins to decrease extraordinarily. And so exports is an important part of growing the energy sector here in the United States. And I thought that was a kind of a unique take on it in the way that they brought it up. There was a lot of comments that were made in that short little, probably 10-minute segment of the show. I wrote a half a page of notes on that 10-minute segment because there was a lot of things that were brought up that do bring up a lot of good points that people should be considering, but really didn't explain them. And really didn't explain them in a way that people could understand why are they important.
All right, Warren Martin, we got time for one more segment of Landman. You can find it exclusively on Paramount Plus. We have discount links available at thecrudelife.com if you'd like to check it out. Warren Martin is our guest. My name is Jason Spees. I'm sitting in for Steve Bakken here today, folks. He'll be back tomorrow. I think some Essentia Health people are going to come in studio. And Landman, that's what we're reviewing today. There's some Hollywood mixed in there, a little bit of reality mixed in there. Overall, it's entertaining. It's positive for the industry. Get some conversations going. Warren Martin is our guest. My name is Jason Spees, and you're listening to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spees, sitting in today here for Steve Bach, and we're going to be back tomorrow. He's going to be back tomorrow, not we. He will be back tomorrow. Excuse my pronouns, folks. Excuse me. He will be back tomorrow. Essentia Health will be in here. As of right now, Warren Martin is our guest. We're going to finish up a little bit of a review and reaction to episode 5, Landman. I wrote down separation of source and produced product. That was kind of the thesis behind John Hamm's Monty Miller, I believe is his name in the program. His speech was that they're drillers. They're an oil company. They're not Honda. They don't make engines. So stop demonizing the oil and gas companies for what Honda's supposed to be doing or what Yamaha's supposed to be doing or Ford or whoever it might be. That's a common theme in agriculture. It's a common theme in oil and gas. It's a common theme in coal. It's a common theme in many guns. You know, I mean, I mean, you name it. I mean, it's the end user that often gets away with doing the damage, and the source often gets held accountable for what the end user does. So I wrote down separation of source and produced product, kind of gave you a little synopsis. What was your takeaway from John Hamm's speech about what they actually are?
I'm gonna go back to right before his speech. And right before his speech, you had another gentleman that was at the table that was speaking, and he was talking about how nuclear was really the only option to replace oil and gas. And that's absolutely true. Nuclear is the only option that's available in the United States that tomorrow could replace oil and gas as an energy source in the United States. It could replace it on electricity. It could replace it in cars. It could replace it in a variety of different ways. But that'll never happen because the United States is so nuclear scared, afraid of nuclear to such a degree that even if you wanted to put in a new nuclear plant, it would take you 10 years to get the permits in place to be able to put in a nuclear plant. And that's if the administration doesn't change, that would derail you from getting those permits. And so his comment was really strong there. Then he makes the comment that wind costs twice as much as natural gas and solar costs 4 times as much as natural gas. Both of those are true. But and those are huge comments because the news media says something completely different. The wind's free, solar's free, and they're not free. The wind is free and the solar's free, but the collection of them costs money. The transmission of them costs money, and that it has done nothing. If you look at the cost of electricity in the United States, the more wind has grown, the more solar has grown, the more electricity rates have escalated anywhere that we've developed those other resources. So that was kind of the preamble that came into that, leading up to it. And then he comes back with his speech, and I believe his speech is exactly right. That, look, that's not the oil and gas producer's responsibility. You need a product. You've asked us to provide it. Our job is to provide it. And that's what we are in the business of doing, is providing that resource so that you can utilize that. And then it's up to whoever you give it to utilize it in the most environmentally conscious way possible. And that's on them. That's on that part of it. But I think when you come down to, the resources, the division of those resources, one of the things that was really brought up in that meeting was this idea of China and India. And this is where I disagreed with what the script said, what Taylor Sheridan said in the script, because they set it up as if China and India are not nearly as big a users of petroleum as the United States. He went into percentages and talked about how much a percentage of petroleum is utilized by the United States, by India, by China. And basically, it set it up, as I've said several times in our reviews of this, or responses or reactions or whatever word you want to use there. I've said several times that Taylor Sheridan's playing both sides. So I thought he had a really great presentation when they were talking about wind and solar and, the differences between the two. Then he gets to China and India, and they really establish that the United States is the predominant utilizer of petroleum fuels. And the insinuation was, therefore, we are most responsible for environmental issues because we use so much of those petroleum fuels. And China and India don't use nearly as much petroleum as we do. Well, yes and no. China doesn't use as much petroleum as we do right now, predominantly because they went into a lockdown the same time we did, and they've really never came out. Their transportation has not returned to the same levels it was before COVID. And that's why our gasoline prices are as low as they are. Everyone expected them to return to the same level of transportation that they were before, but they haven't. But the fact that they utilize less petroleum in China and India, it does not mean that we are the major destroyer of the environment. What it means is China and India predominantly depend upon coal for their electricity generation and for their industrial energy generation. They depend upon coal. China has an enormous amount of coal resources available to them, but they have very limited resources of petroleum resources. And so it's not really a fair comparison just to look at petroleum and say, okay, we use more petroleum than China or India does, therefore we're the bad guy. It really, when you look at energy mix across the board, every single energy source in the world continues to grow. Why? Because the energy market continues to grow. And so you got oil and gas that's growing. You got nuclear that's growing. Hydro, renewable resources are growing. And coal is growing. And it's predominantly growing in China and India, where they're utilizing it to provide cheap, reliable energy for their people. And so I don't think that was a very fair comparison in the show.
Warren, thank you very much. We'll review episode 6 next week. And folks, we have a discount link right here in the description if anybody wants to subscribe to Paramount Plus. You are on the road this week, is that right? A quick preview of where people can catch you. You're going to be hitting the media rounds, huh?
Yeah, I'll be Great Bend tomorrow on radio, and then I'm in Hutchinson the day after that. Day after that, I'm in Russell, Kansas, and then in Concordia, Kansas, and then round out the week in Kansas City.
Folks, he's the busiest guy in the oil and gas industry. His name is Warren Martin. My name is Jason Spees, sitting in for Steve Bakken. This is Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
Super Talk 1270.
Talk of the Town. Weekday mornings starting at 9 on Super Talk 1270 and the free Super Talk 1270 mobile app.